The sound of heavy, rapid breathing echoed through the dojo, cutting through the harsh clang of fists meeting pads. Sweat slicked the floor, marking the intensity of the sparring match that had quickly spiraled out of control. On one side, the black belts circled like wolves. On the other, two girls, barely 13, but standing their ground like warriors twice their age. "You think you're tough because you can throw a punch?" One of the black belts sneered, blocking the younger girl's jab. His voice was smooth, dripping with condescension. The twins, Malia and Kiana, stood side by side, hearts racing, but their eyes locked in unspoken understanding. Their backs straightened, their fists tightened. This wasn't the first time they'd been cornered in this dojo, and it wouldn't be the last. They had heard the whispers before, felt the heat of judgment in the air, but today they weren't backing down. "You're just little girls," the second black belt taunted, his stance wide, almost theatrical, as he faked a jab and grinned. "This is a man's sport." Without warning, Malia stepped forward, her body moving with a fluidity that matched the tension in the room. A sharp, practiced kick landed squarely on his chest, sending him stumbling back. She didn't hesitate. Kiana, right behind her, caught his arm as he reached for her sister, twisting it with a speed that had his face contorting in pain. The room froze. For a moment, the air was thick with disbelief. The sense of discomfort spread, but it was no longer directed at the twins. The black belts exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of how to regain control. The twins had done what they'd always done when backed into a corner. They fought back, harder than anyone expected. "You don't belong here," one of the black belts growled, pushing himself back to his feet. Kiana stepped forward this time, her voice as cold as the fear burning in their eyes. "This is our dojo. You're the ones who don't belong." The world seemed to hold its breath, the space between justice and retribution hanging by the thinnest of threads. The first thing people noticed about Malia and Kiana wasn't their braids or how identical they looked. It was how quiet they were. Not timid, not withdrawn, just observant. They moved through the dojo like shadows, not out of fear, but focus. While others shouted through drills and flexed after kicks, the twins stayed silent, studying. Malia had this habit of tilting her head slightly to the right when someone demonstrated a new technique, eyes narrowing, like she was watching the moment behind the moment. Kiana would watch the floor instead, tracking footwork like a dance, memorizing pressure and rhythm. They didn't talk much unless they were with each other. Words between them came in fragments and looks. A nod, a tap, the flick of an eyebrow. They spoke in rhythm, moved in mirrors. Most days, people mistook that for weirdness or weakness. Their mom called it their superpower. When they weren't at school, they were training. In the mornings before the sun came up, they ran drills on the porch, bag work after homework, sparring in the garage. Not because someone told them to, because they wanted to. Because when they were kicking, striking, moving, they were free. It was the one place the world's noise couldn't reach them. The dojo wasn't fancy, mats peeling at the edges, paint fading on the walls, but it was sacred to them. It was where they'd first seen strength without shouting, grace in pain, where their quiet had a place. Still, even here, they were different. Two black girls in a sea of older, louder boys. Most of them bigger, bolder, already wearing black belts with their names stitched in gold thread. The twins? White belts. No names, no respect. Not yet. But Malia never flinched under the stares, and Kiana never dropped her gaze when the jokes flew. They knew what everyone thought, that they were soft, too girly, too quiet to survive in a world that glorified dominance. But they also knew something the others didn't. They weren't here to survive. They were here to win. The dojo didn't need to say it out loud. It showed it. At first, it was in the little things. Malia and Kiana's names always said wrong at roll call, like an inconvenience. Their instructor, Sensei Brooks, would pause, squint at the clipboard, then mutter something close enough and move on without looking up. But when it came to Logan, Cody, or Tyler, the boys with loud punches and louder fathers, their names were called crisp, proud, even if they were late. The twins showed up early, always. Yet somehow they ended up sweeping mats after class, cleaning gear no one else touched. "Paying your dues," Sensei Brooks would say. But they'd never seen Logan wipe down anything in his life. During partner drills, the lines shuffled with practice choreography. Everyone avoided pairing with the girls. Some acted like they didn't see them. Others laughed, saying, "Nah, I don't want to go easy today." When they finally did get matched, it was either with each other, again, or with some junior belt who clearly resented it. Sparring days were worse. When Malia landed a solid strike, her opponent would snarl, "Lucky shot." When Kiana blocked a roundhouse clean, the boy would complain she wasn't playing fair. There were eye rolls, scoffs, and the always unspoken message, "You don't belong here." Not really. Sensei Brooks rarely stepped in. When he did, it was only to correct them. "Hands too low, Kiana. Keep that guard up. Malia, don't be so aggressive. Control your temper." Temper? They hadn't even raised their voices. But then again, girls like them weren't supposed to be assertive, especially not black girls. In this dojo, obedience looked different depending on your skin. Discipline felt different depending on your gender. Worse still, the black belts, the senior students, supposedly leaders, had started treating them like a game, whispered jokes behind their backs. "Let's see if we can break their rhythm today," they'd say. "Bet they cry by round 3. And when the twins didn't cry, they upped the stakes. Longer rounds, rougher contact, more public embarrassment. Kiana once limped home with a bruise the size of a grapefruit on her thigh. No apology, no foul called. Just a smirk from her opponent and a shrug from the sensei. "That's what happens when you hold your block too slow," he said. That night, they sat in silence on their bedroom floor, ice packs pressed to their legs. Neither said a word. They didn't have to. The dojo was speaking loud and clear. It wasn't just about fighting. It was about power, and who they believed deserved to have it. By the 3rd month, it wasn't subtle anymore. The drills were stacked against them. The random partner selections always placed Malia and Kiana with the most aggressive black belts, the ones who threw heavy without restraint. It stopped being training and started feeling like survival. Kiana took a spinning back kick to the ribs one Friday. It landed with a hollow thud that echoed off the walls. She dropped to her knees, gasping. The boy who kicked her didn't flinch. Neither did Sensei Brooks. "You gotta learn to take a hit," he barked from across the room, arms folded, eyes cold. "You want equal treatment? This is it." Malia was already at her sister's side, hands trembling but steady as she helped her up. Kiana said nothing. Not a wince, not a complaint. Just nodded, stood, and faced her opponent again. That silence, it burned more than any bruise. Word spread through the dojo, whispered rumors that the twins thought they were special, that they got extra attention because they were girls. The boys spun the story until victim became villain. They act like they're untouchable. They get babied. They're ruining sparring for everyone else. No one asked why they never complained, why they kept showing up, why they never retaliated, because that would mean admitting what everyone else refused to see. It wasn't a test anymore. It was a purge. The twins were being pushed to quit. After one brutal session, Malia locked herself in the bathroom stall. Her forearms were purple. Her lips split. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was barely more than a whisper. "Why are we even here?" Outside, Kiana waited, still. She didn't try to talk her sister down. She just leaned on the sink, staring at her own reflection, fists clenched so tight her knuckles had turned white. "Because we're not going to let them erase us," she said, voice low. They both knew what was really happening. It wasn't just about martial arts. It was about proving a point. That strong, disciplined, fearless black girls didn't belong in this space. That their silence meant surrender. But they were done taking hits and calling it training. Done being quiet so the dojo could stay comfortable. The pain wasn't accidental anymore. It was designed to break them. But if there's one thing no one had understood yet, it was this. Malia and Kiana didn't break. They adapted. And soon they'd start pushing back. The thing about twins is, they plan in silence. While the dojo thought it was breaking them down, Malia and Kiana were already building something stronger. Every bruise, every insult, every calculated humiliation. They logged it, quietly, systematically. Malia kept a journal, not the kind filled with feelings. This one had timestamps, names, sequences of drills, notes on technique patterns. She mapped out which black belts targeted them most, which instructors looked away, who laughed when they fell. Every sparring session, every injury, recorded, not for sympathy, for evidence. Kiana, the more technical of the two, began analyzing footage. Their mom had always filmed their practices at home, for progress, for memories. Now those sessions became labs. They started reenacting the exact combos they'd seen used against them, studying not just how to defend, but how to counter, dismantle, and expose. Their mom noticed the bruises before she noticed the strategy. At first, she wanted to pull them out, but they told her not to. They asked her instead to help. So she did. She signed them up for weekend seminars across the city, taught by women, former champions, veterans of the sport, instructors who knew what it meant to walk into a gym and be underestimated. They trained in basements, garages, community centers, spaces built for resilience, not ego. And they learned. Footwork so silent it could disappear under noise. Lock breaks with pinpoint precision. Breathing patterns to preserve energy when you're being chased across the mat. Lessons the dojo had refused to teach them because they assumed they wouldn't last long enough to need them. By the fourth month, the twins weren't fighting for acceptance. They were building toward disruption. They started baiting during sparring. Small moves that looked like mistakes but set up devastating counters. Malia would drop her shoulder just a hair too early, drawing out a strike, then pivot into a takedown. Kiana began weaving between high-impact combos, testing how far she could push her endurance before fatigue made her predictable. And the black belts noticed. They just didn't understand what they were seeing. They thought the girls were still flinching. They didn't realize they were calculating, waiting. Because this wasn't about surviving anymore. It was about revealing the truth, not just about the dojo, but the system it represented. The boys' club with a belt code, the silence that protected power. They didn't need anyone to rescue them. They just needed the right moment to flip the script. And it was coming. It began with posture. Malia stopped flinching when her name was called. She walked to the mat with her chin lifted, gloves loose at her sides, eyes locked forward like she already knew how the round would end. Kiana, once hesitant to meet stares, now returned them. Not with defiance, but detachment. Calculated, cold. Watching like a chess player, not a fighter. The black belts didn't notice the difference at first. They thought the girls had finally been broken into obedience. Sensei Brooks even nodded in satisfaction during drills. See? They're learning control. But they weren't controlled. They were coiled. Kiana let her opponent overextend during sparring. Not just once, again and again. Each time she'd slip out, barely reacting, almost bored. The boy grew sloppier, louder, frustrated that she wouldn't fight back the way she used to. Malia changed her stance too. She held her center tighter, kept her guard just low enough to invite arrogance. The black belt she sparred with leaned in to mock her, grinning as he threw a careless jab. She caught his wrist midair, not hard enough to hurt, just enough to let him know. I could have. The dojo had trained them in aggression, but the girls had studied something deeper, restraint. They didn't strike to win anymore. They moved to reveal. Kiana timed her dodges so precisely that it made her opponent look clumsy. Malia adjusted her footwork to expose her sparring partner's imbalance. Every round became a performance. Not of domination, but exposure. Slow, surgical, public. And yet no one called it. Not yet. Because the black belts were too arrogant. Sensei Brooks too invested in his narrative. They still saw the twins as lucky, passive, beneath them. That was the point. Because patience was a weapon too. And the girls had learned how to wield it. They didn't need the crowd's validation or the sensei's approval. They weren't here to prove they belonged. They were waiting, not for permission, but for the perfect moment to pull the entire system into the light. It happened on a Saturday. A full house. Parents lined the walls. Students from neighboring dojos had come to watch the quarterly sparring showcase, a tradition meant to highlight the best talent under Sensei Brooks's guidance. Everyone knew what it really was, a performance. The black belts got the spotlight. The white belts, background noise. But this time, Malia and Kiana weren't background. They were scheduled last. To show humility, Brooks had said with that thin smile. Everyone knew what it meant. They were meant to be an easy finale, a soft, silent lesson in hierarchy. They bowed, tied their gloves, stood center mat beneath the fluorescent buzz and thick air of sweat and ego. Malia stepped up first. Her opponent, Jace, a senior black belt. Fast, tall, cocky, the kind who grinned between rounds like a frat boy at a keg party. He spun his belt once before stepping forward. "You sure you're ready for this?" he said loud enough for the crowd to hear. Malia didn't answer. She just moved. He came at her hard, swinging low with a sweeping kick meant to rattle her balance. But she wasn't there. She slid out, pivoted on her back heel, and caught him off-center with a jab to the sternum. Not heavy, just a sting. Jace blinked, surprised, then laughed. "You want to dance? Let's dance." He unleashed a flurry, hook, elbow, side kick. Aggressive, overconfident. But Malia didn't resist it head-on. She redirected, glided. Every strike he threw became another thread she pulled from his foundation, and then she broke his rhythm. A feint with her left shoulder drew his block high. She stepped in, hooked his back leg with surgical precision, and sent him crashing to the mat. Gasps. Then silence. He scrambled to his feet, face red, breathing heavy. Malia stepped back, bowed with perfect form, and tagged in Kiana. Her opponent was Brixton, the loudest of the black belts, known for trash talk and heavy contact. He cracked his neck, grinning like this was his show. Kiana stood relaxed, hands low, bouncing gently on the balls of her feet. Calm, empty, he charged. She didn't flinch. She timed the first strike, a lunging punch, and slid under it, countering with a spinning back elbow that clipped his shoulder. Not enough to injure, just enough to make him reset. He hesitated, and that's when she dismantled him. Inside low kick, shuffle step, backward pivot. Every move was clean, lethal in tempo but restrained in power. She was teaching, not punishing, making sure everyone saw how she took apart the top of the food chain without cruelty, only skill. He swung wild. She slipped and countered with a palm strike to his chest. He fell back, stunned. The audience wasn't cheering. They were silent, watching, understanding. Sensei Brooks stepped forward, lips pressed into a thin line, eyes unreadable. But he saw it. Everyone did. This wasn't an upset. It was a reckoning. The girls bowed, side by side, synchronized, still. They hadn't shouted. They hadn't gloated. They had simply shown with quiet precision that power built on intimidation was weak, and truth, when wielded without fear, was unstoppable. The fallout started before the mats were even rolled up. A local reporter in the crowd, there to cover the event as a fluff piece, had caught the entire showcase on camera. But what she captured wasn't just two gifted girls outmaneuvering black belts. It was control, precision, a dismantling of bias in real time. What she didn't expect was the footage Malia's mom uploaded that same night. Clips from months of recorded classes, spliced together, dated, annotated. You saw it all. Jace landing full contact strikes during a light spar drill. Sensei Brooks ignoring Kiana's limp after a brutal sweep. Malia being called too emotional after taking an elbow to the face. Laughter from the sidelines when one of the twins was knocked down. Then came the testimonies. Quietly at first, then a flood. Former students, some long gone from the dojo, began commenting under the post. Stories of being discouraged out of advanced training, of being told their bodies weren't built for power, of boys being taught aggression while girls were taught to endure. It spread fast. Local news picked it up, then regional martial arts forums, then a national blog focused on gender and equity in sports. Parents pulled their kids from the dojo. The sponsors dropped out. The state federation issued a formal review. Sensei Brooks released a statement claiming training intensity was misunderstood, but no one bought it. Not after hearing his voice in those clips. Cold, dismissive, mocking. Jason Brixton, suspended from tournaments for unsportsmanlike conduct pending further investigation. Their reputations, once built on arrogance, now stained with evidence. By the end of the week, the dojo was half empty. The sign on the door flickered. The silence inside wasn't discipline, it was decay. But outside that building, something new was forming. Not just vindication for the twins, but validation for every quiet fighter who had ever been told to toughen up and stay quiet. This wasn't just exposure, it was accountability. 6 months later, the old dojo was gone. The building still stood, a hollow space of faded banners and dust-streaked windows, but the sign had been taken down. No more classes, no more belts passed down like favors. The echoes inside belonged to memory now. But 2 blocks away, a new school had opened. It didn't have mirrors on every wall or a polished trophy case. What it had was floor space, focus, and a banner that read, "Strength means nothing without integrity." Malia and Kiana were there almost every day, not as students, as assistant instructors. They led warm-ups for the younger kids, taught them how to fall without fear and how to stand without apology. Girls who once hesitated to join now filled the class. Boys trained beside them, learning respect before they ever learned speed. Their mom sat by the door most evenings, watching the ripple effect her daughters had sparked, not by shouting, but by enduring with purpose. Meanwhile, Sensei Brooks had disappeared from the circuit. His name was removed from the regional training council. Whispers said he moved out of state, but no one bothered to follow. He'd become what he once feared, irrelevant. Jason Brixton tried to join another dojo, but word had spread. Their reputations followed them, not as victims of cancel culture, but as examples of unchecked privilege collapsing under truth. And the twins? They trained, not for revenge, not even for recognition. They trained because they loved it again, because the mat no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt like a platform, a place where silence didn't mean submission, it meant strategy. Other dojos began adjusting policies. More female instructors were hired. A nonprofit reached out to the twins and their mom, offering to sponsor a national campaign around equity in martial arts programs. What started as survival became legacy. They didn't burn the system down. They rebuilt what it could be. One student, one strike, one breath at a time. Some victories are loud, crowds cheering, headlines blazing, medals gleaming. Others are quiet, like 2 sisters walking into a dojo that once tried to break them, and building something stronger in its place. Malia and Kiana didn't win because they fought harder. They won because they understood the deeper fight, the one beneath the surface, where strength isn't muscle, but clarity, where power isn't how loud you speak, but how deeply you stand in truth when no one's listening. They didn't need to beat the system to beat it. They only needed to outlast it with purpose. And now, their story isn't just theirs. It belongs to every kid who's ever been underestimated, dismissed, or told to be quiet and tough it out. It's for the ones who stay behind after class, not to complain, but to keep going. Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you build so others can rise. And sometimes that starts with 2 fearless girls in white belts, standing still when the world told them to bow. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it waits, calm, watching, learning, and strikes only when the silence becomes stronger than the noise. Let that be the story we remember. Let that be the story we carry forward.